barely describes it. Again, that is Judge Corrigan in his own words, that Corrine Brown's actions, brazen, barely describes it. He goes on to say, she used her position as a member of Congress, and that allowed her to commit these crimes. Ms. Brown leveraged that authority of her office and the relationship she cultivated to illegal purpose. In that process, she cast aside the very laws that she helped to enact. The rules she decided did not apply to her. So for those of you at home wondering what Judge Corrigan was thinking, these are some insights into his mindset and why he gave her 5 years. I've also been doing some math for everyone. 85% of a 5-year sentence will be 3 years and 10 months in prison. If she goes away in January, this coming January 2018, Corrine Brown would be 75 years old when released from prison to then begin that 3 years supervised release. Bruce and Melanie?
Lindsay, thank you so much. You know, that was one of the points that her attorney did point out, that he respected the judge's decision, but said that he respectfully agreed that a 71-year-old woman should have to go to jail for this sentence. Did want to point out, though, to her supporters, saying that she is still strong and resolute, but that she's not going to give up, and that he talked about the appeal. We also got a statement, Bruce, from the FBI, and part of it says that, you know, they're just incredibly disappointed that an elected official who took an oath after year to serve others would exploit the needs of children.
And as you go on to read that statement, which I'm sure will be on newsforjax.com later today, they talk about the fact that their work, he's talking about the investigators, is some of the most complex, tedious, and significant work we do for the American public. We thank our law enforcement partners, the IRS, CI, and U.S. Attorney's Office for their efforts to hold Brown and her associates accountable for their inexcusable actions. Of course, the FBI was behind the investigation itself and helped pull together some of the evidence that was used to help the jury come to its conclusion. Bring Jennifer Waugh back into the fold here. Jen, there are people who say there is racial motivation to have, number one, brought these charges, and number one, to bring about this guilty verdict. There are people who believe that she shouldn't serve time simply because of the fact she had done so much positive for the community, and others who say because of her age she should have been given probation. As you listen to people in and around the courthouse, what are you hearing?
Yeah, well, that's interesting. They are supportive. One said that, you know, it could have been worse. The other said that they didn't feel that she should get any jail time. And to your point also, Bruce, about the FBI, I mean, you'll remember that Corrine Brown has said that she thought that this was a witch hunt, that she thought that this was racially motivated, these charges initially levied against her. But the judge was very specific today for more than an hour, laying things out, the decision that he reached, and felt that it was absolutely wrong of Corrine Brown to suggest that in any way, shape, or form the charges brought against her were at all racially motivated. Jim Piggott was there when the judge made those comments and was also there speaking with some of Corrine Brown's supporters, and you were there asking her questions when she left. First of all, share with us a little bit what some of her supporters had to say to you, because some really felt that this was too much. Others were more a sigh of relief.
Well, they were saying it could have been worse. It could have been more, so that they were relieved on. But the supporters that I was talking to basically don't believe that she was guilty of this at all. In fact, one was saying that it was Ronnie Simmons that orchestrated everything and that Corrine did not know. I was asking, but you know, she was found guilty. The judge sentenced her. She's going to jail, pending that appeal, but she's going to jail. And they were adamant, you know, they're saying, no, we don't think, we think the appeal process, we don't think she's going to be in jail. And you heard James Smith even basically saying that, you know, hey, she's out now, they're going to do the appeal, she may not serve any time in jail. That remains to be seen. But what we do know, that she's getting 5 years. They were adamant, like I said, that she was not involved with this.
I was here, didn't have an opportunity. For those of our viewers who were just joining us, how would you describe, because I understand she was flanked by 6 or 7 people, it was difficult to see her, how would you describe her demeanor as she was kind of, we've seen her always come out the front, well, kind of thought she would make a comment, but did not.
Crouched over like this, head down, going to the car. Those people that we were talking to, those supporters, they were the ones that were actually blocking her so she could get protecting her, getting into the car. Chantrell was driving, her daughter was driving, and then they made their way out. So she didn't take any questions at all. You know, everybody's asking, you know, how do you feel? What's next? Just her head was down, and away she went.
Yeah, it's interesting, too, because her attorney said, you know, she needs time now to process. And let's listen in to your interviewing of her very quickly here. Yeah, so to this day, many who say, hey, we don't think that she's guilty, but we have to point out that they weren't in court and weren't not necessarily there to hear some of the evidence.
Well, and one of the people that was there was one of the character witnesses that came up at the end, and she was one. It could have been worse. You know, the 5 years, you know, like there could have been more. And she was saying, you know, there's a lot more to this that didn't come out. And another one was basically, another man was saying that it was Ronnie Simmons. He was the wolf in sheep's clothing. And that's what the problem was. But we know what the jury said. And that's what they said. And then we know what the judge said. This was a crime. They were there lining their pockets with money that should have gone to children.
Jim Pickett, thank you very much. I'd like to bring Rhonda Peoples-Waters also in. It's interesting, Rhonda, too, because what is interesting about this particularly is whether or not we are in a situation now where you've heard from James Smith really making this emotional plea to the fact that he thinks that what happened to her, that he feels that she's an innocent woman that is now going to jail to prison, could be for a long time, that the system is broken. As a defense attorney, do you agree with that?
Well, I can tell you that I understand his position on things, and I understand what he's saying. The fact that she's not a danger to the public as far as this is not a violent crime, yet she's serving, you know, a substantial sentence of 5 years. However, on the other hand, the government is going to argue that there has to be some type of public deterrence to obviously prevent the public and anyone else. They want that message to be clear that if you're a public in a public office, you know, that there's a level of trust that's extended to you. And if you abuse that trust, then these are going to be the stiff consequences. So I think it can be understood both ways.
Rhonda Peoples-Waters, thank you very much for your insight today. And we should point out, of course, as Rhonda just mentioned, that the prosecutor in this said all along during that sentencing hearing specifically that you are sending a message, Judge Corrigan, to other political leaders. Probation would suggest that there is not a deterrent to anyone who makes the decision to break the law. And as we saw today, Judge Corrigan clearly felt that way, handing down a sentence of 5 years for Corrine Brown. We are live downtown outside the federal courthouse. Jennifer Waugh, Channel 4, the local station.
And Jen, thank you very much. And, you know, and as we talk about the dollars and cents, $800,000, and we heard from those people who donated that money in earnest, thinking that it was going to go to children when only $1,200 went to actual scholarships. So again, we will be right back after a short break.
Congresswoman, do you have anything to say at all?
Ms. Brown, are you afraid of going to prison?
Congresswoman.
Excuse us. Move back. Move back.
I'm going over to this side here. Congresswoman, nothing. So basically, Corrine Brown just came out with those supporters standing around her. She's in the back seat of the car here, getting ready to leave. Didn't say a word at all. And you can see Chantrell Brown and others are here as well. They're offering their support, her supporters here. You can see, so the Congresswoman is leaving without saying a word. Her daughter's driving the car, and they're escorting her out here. She went quickly into the car as we were standing by, as James. Congresswoman, do you have anything to say at all?
Ms. Brown, are you afraid of going to prison?
Congresswoman.
Excuse us. Move back. Move back.
I'm going over to this side here. Congresswoman, nothing. So basically, Corrine Brown just came out with those supporters standing around her. She's in the back seat of the car here, getting ready to leave. Didn't say a word at all.
Corrine Brown was sentenced to 5 years in prison. What we don't know is when she'll have to report, if she'll ever see some time behind bars. The judge does have the latitude to say, you can post bond, and we will keep you, you'll have your freedom, you'll have your release, pending the outcome of that appeal. That's yet to be decided.
And that appeal must be filed by next week. Her attorney, James Smith, saying that they are definitely going to file that appeal within the deadline. So she is getting 5 years in prison. As of now, she will serve 85% of that term. As Lindsey Gardner pointed out, that would put her in jail until she is 75 years old, with 3 years supervised release beyond that. And then the $250 that she'll have to pay back for many years, the $800,000 that was left unaccounted for. This is her as she is leaving the courtroom this morning. She's been all morning in there facing the two people who also were on trial, people she thought were her friends. She felt betrayed, and she had nothing to say when she got into the car this afternoon.
Uncharacteristic for the usually vocal former Congresswoman. As for Ronnie Simmons, her former chief of staff, a man that she said she considered a son, he will serve 48 months in prison. 3 years is what the guideline had suggested, so he actually gets a little bit more. And then there's Carla Wiley, who was the head of that fake charity. You were talking about how much money was diverted to, well, personal accounts, a slush fund, essentially. Carla Wiley gets 21 months in jail and a 3 years supervised release. Both she and Ronnie Simmons are set to report to their respective facilities. Carla Wiley in Virginia, Ronnie Simmons, we're not sure, by January 8th.
All right, and what, again, we don't know, and we're still waiting to hear, what will happen within the appeals process. James Smith saying that he would maybe possibly represent her, but that there could be some other attorneys that would be more appropriate. But again, that is something that we will continue to ask and follow, and he was very open in his comments to the media today. So we are staying on top of this big local story all day long. Of course, you can find the very latest on news4jax.com. We'll run that complete interview and everything that happened in the courtroom there.